Did you know that if you have a less than ideal initial book launch, that's the end of the road? Yeah, you can't do anything about it. That statement doesn't ring true, does it? You kind of have a feeling that if your book launch doesn't do great at the beginning, there's something you can do about it, right? Maybe you didn't know this. Maybe you thought it was against the rules. But in this episode of the podcast, we're going to be having a little bit of a heart to heart to encourage you and to inspire you to maybe, if it's right, consider relaunching your book. It's not cheating to do this, I promise you. As your writing coach, I would not lie to you. And on this episode of the How to Be an Author podcast, I want to talk to you a little bit about your journey as an author. It's full of twists and turns. It does have some seasons of disappointment and frustration. But ultimately, after all of that, you need to believe that your story matters. It's not just that you poured your heart and soul into crafting a book, which is, by the way, an achievement in and of itself. But you had courage and bravery to share your words with the world. You worked damn hard, you were damn brave, and your journey as a writer is not going to be defined by a single launch that didn't go exactly as planned. It's defined much more by the passion and dedication that you bring to your craft every day. So I want you to see a relaunch as an opportunity, as something that potentially is going to give your book the attention it deserves. If you make improvements, if you refine your message, if you try to reach new readers who might not have discovered your book the first time, this can be a real fresh start. It can be a second wind that breathes new life into your story. Listen, many successful authors initially faced setbacks and disappointments along their journey. Not every book is a bestseller, but these authors, they persevered and they kept pushing forward. And we're going to be talking about some of those authors in this episode of the How to Be an Author podcast. But for now, you need to realize that you can absolutely do the same. You can take the lessons that you learned from your initial launch, even if they were tough ones, and you can use them as stepping stones to create a relaunch plan, because a plan is very, very important, but a plan that addresses the areas that might need improvement. And you are going to reflect on the feedback and reviews that you got, and you're going to embrace that constructive criticism, and you're going to use it to make your book even better. You're going to think about what to do so that your marketing strategy can resonate like never before. Maybe it's your cover that needs a tweak. Maybe it's something else, but here's the most important thing. You're going to believe in your book. You're going to believe in your characters and your story and in the emotions that you have evoked. There are readers out there who also believe in you. They're waiting for your words. They're waiting to be transported by your words, by your world, all of that. So in this episode of the podcast, I want us to really consider the full potential of a relaunch, from marketing strategies and promotional opportunities to reworking your work, to a new cover, to looking at the data in certain ways. Let's talk about how we can relaunch a book as well as possible. Let's talk about avoiding some of the common pitfalls that come with relaunching. Let's talk about the whys and the hows. I think that this is going to be so important for you to embrace these challenges, celebrate the progress that you're making, and stay true to your voice as you relaunch with confidence. Let's keep writing. Let's keep dreaming. Let's let your story shine more than ever. Let's go and start talking about the possibilities of a book relaunch. If you're a writer dreaming of becoming a successful author, join me, writing coach Karena Akhavein, on the How to Be an Author podcast, your weekly source for writing information, inspiration, and motivation. Hello, and welcome to the How to Be an Author podcast. I'm writing coach Karena Akhavein. My passion in life is helping authors like you succeed in their writing careers, whatever that means for them, and no matter where you find yourself in your writing journey. As a writing coach, I focus not only on nitty-gritty writing skills, but also on publishing advice, on helping you with the mindset and with productivity tips and motivation tips. And I I really feel like a relaunch kind of touches on all these different areas of that holistic thing that I do to help you with your writing career. So this is something I've been thinking of a lot. And full disclosure, this is something that I am considering doing myself. So quick story about one of my book launches. I launched a fiction book like right during COVID. And honestly, for all of you who thought like, yeah, I'm going to be writing so much during COVID, I'm going to be reading so much during COVID, I think many of you realize that very few of us were able to do like a concerted effort on anything at all. We were much more busy making sourdough or, exercising or not, or gaining a bunch of weight or watching, the same short shows or something like that. Like we were a little bit messed up. And when I launched this book, I was really in the middle of building my writing coaching business. So I was super busy. I had teenage kids who were living in close quarters in a little house that was not designed to have kids in it. And I basically was just dealing with a lot of personal stuff. So this book, which I totally believe in, and I totally think it's a wonderful story, but it didn't get the attention it deserved. And listen, this is kind of the way that I have understood how much work it takes to actually promote a book. There is no way, no matter how good your book is, that you can just write it and leave it and have it magically get discovered. That doesn't happen. So I think that I was still kind of dreaming about that happening. It's hilarious how I can tell every writer that that doesn't work. Yet when it came to my own book, I'm like, you know what? Let's see. And yeah, I did see not very many sales at all. I had some, but nothing close to what I would consider successful, even being realistic and knowing everything I know about self-publishing and all of that. It was kind of a disappointment. And now when I look at it in my Amazon KDP bookshelf, for example, I'm just kind of bummed. And that's a shame. That's something that I don't want you to feel yourself. So now I'm thinking to myself, you know what? This book, if I just edit it a tiny bit, which it barely needs because it's been edited professionally 3 times now. But if I just give it a kind of spiffier cover, and if I drum up excitement, and if I create a whole new marketing campaign for it, that might give it the attention that it deserves. So I've started thinking about doing this as I promote other books under other pen names, which of course I didn't make the same mistakes with. So I know now the difference between doing something right and doing something wrong. And I am always trying out new ways of doing these things because marketing changes, the publishing industry changes, the market changes. And as a writing coach who's trying to help as many authors as possible to keep current with what it takes to be a successful author, I try all of these things as an experiment so that I can help you better. So I'm taking one for the team. That's really important. That's what I do so that courses like From Idea to Publish in 6 months can keep helping you over time so that they don't become stale. I just keep adding and changing these things. And the same thing goes for your books, right? Your books shouldn't get stale. So let's talk about a few examples of authors or novelists who successfully relaunched their books, or who kind of had an initial crappy launch and who then achieved renewed success. I'm going to give you a few notable examples. So let's start with The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. This book, when it was first published in 1925, had decidedly mixed reviews. It wasn't the most popular book ever. And then it experienced a huge revival in the 50s and 60s. And sadly, this was long after Fitzgerald's death, right? That kind of sucks. But the book became a staple in high school and college curricula, and it became recognized as a classic of American literature. Now, I don't want you to die before your book becomes a classic, right? So we're going to try to work on things now. You don't want to waste too much time. But later in this episode, I'm going to tell you about the timing of a relaunch. Like, don't do it too soon, don't do it too late, that sort of thing. Another book that kind of was first published and was kind of blah was To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. So yeah, Harper Lee won a Pulitzer Prize for this. But in 1960, when it was published, it won a prize, no doubt, but it wasn't that popular until it was adapted into an Oscar-winning film in 1962. And this introduced a new generation of readers to the book. And that led to enduring success. So that's a really cool lesson too, is like, okay, what are other ways of telling this story? You might decide that like, I'm not going to relaunch my book as a book necessarily, though I think that's a good idea, but maybe you can motivate yourself by saying, okay, I'm going to relaunch this, but my plan is to make a movie treatment or to encourage somebody else to do a movie treatment for it. Maybe that'll work. So that's kind of interesting. Another book that was originally published and that wasn't so popular right away was The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. This became a sensation only in the 1960s. And this is what solidified Tolkien's reputation as a master storyteller. So it took a while to really take hold. Interestingly, a huge classic, which is The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, that was published in Portuguese in 1988. Okay, well, Portuguese is a great language. It's not the biggest market on earth when it comes to books. So when it was translated into English and published internationally in the late 1990s, that is when it became the globally recognized work that it is today. And Coelho himself was promoting this book all the time. And word of mouth really became a huge factor in this book becoming a massive international bestseller that continues to resonate with readers today. Now, how about The Help by Catherine Stockett? This book was initially rejected by a ton of literary agents. It was only in 2009 that it was released by a publisher. And then the word of mouth and critical acclaim had it building to becoming slowly a bestseller, which then was adapted into a film in 2011. So you need to give a book a little bit of time to start to develop. So just because you publish your book and it's not a bestseller in 2 weeks doesn't mean that you cannot slowly build to doing much, much better. It takes a concerted effort. This is really important. So maybe if you launched your book like last week and you're like, oh, it totally didn't work, maybe that doesn't mean that you need to take it down right away and relaunch it and rework it. Maybe you want to give it a little bit more of a chance, but you can't sleep on it. You can't rest on your laurels. You definitely need to be thinking about, how am I going to boost this book in the long run? Very important. And then the last one I'm going to mention is The Martian by Andy Weir. This book was initially self-published as an ebook in 2011, and it started gaining a big following amongst science fiction fans, and that's when it caught the attention of a literary agent, which means that it was re-released by a major publisher in 2014, which is the thing that led to its acclaim and the subsequent film adaptation in 2015. So again, just because you're self-publishing doesn't mean that the next chapter isn't maybe conventional representation. It used to be that when you would publish a book as an ebook, that agents wouldn't touch it. And things have changed a little bit, but here's the important thing. Don't dream that you can have a book that you self-publish and it does super crappy, and then all of a sudden, miraculously, an agent's going to want it. No. Literary agents are in the business of representing books that are going to sell. So if you're not making the effort to make your book have at least some acclaim and some success through word of mouth and through your other efforts, then the agent's not going to think, yeah, this is a book I can totally sell. They're just going to pass on it and they're going to move on to the next one. So let's start talking about several reasons why an author might want to relaunch their book. Okay, first major and obvious reason is low initial visibility. Your book just didn't receive the level of exposure you thought it deserved during its initial release, right? So you're like, okay, I'm going to relaunch it. That's going to give it an opportunity to have a second chance and reach a wider audience. Okay, that's true in a way, but if you just relaunch it and you're making the same mistakes you made last time, that's not going to happen. So we're going to talk about how not to make the same mistakes, but definitely just relaunching alone is not the miracle thing that's going to make your book be more visible. So remember that. Be realistic. Now, many times, authors think about their target audience. So many times, and in this podcast, I've said, okay, find your ideal reader avatar, or who's your target audience. This is a really important thing for authors to think of as they have a marketing plan. But sometimes you think about your book some more and you think, you know what? There might be a different audience for my book. either just a different audience, a broader audience, or maybe just like a completely, micro niche that's going to be really highly engaged and that might be easier to market to, right? So if you identify a new demographic that could be super interested in your story, or if you've made revisions to your book that make it more appealing to a specific group of readers, it might be time to relaunch your book for sure. But you really want to focus on that audience when you do so. Because relaunching to a super broad audience, that's like a lot of work in all different directions. So being a little bit more targeted this time might yield a little bit more success. I talked about changing things, making revisions to your book. This is often one of the, situations where you're going to relaunch a book, right? You kind of have to change something, right? So many times you might want to be changing the branding, right? So is that the cover design? Is that the description, the categorization in the genres? Or are you emphasizing different aspects of the story in order to attract a different readership? All of these things have consequences, and you really need to think about it before you do it. And sometimes if you're just tweaking the cover or just tweaking the wording, you don't need to do a full relaunch. You can just update this on your Amazon KDP, for example, and then, just see if there's a change. For example, if you change some of the keywords, is there a change in sales just from sheer SEO? There might be. Sometimes you might identify a market trend. So a lot of writers, you hear the warning, like don't write to the market necessarily. And many times writers are like, oh, I should just write a vampire story. It'll sell 1 million copies. And sometimes they're like, oh, you know what? I'm going to kind of update my book and I'm going to be kind of changing it a little bit so that it aligns with a trend. I'm capitalizing on a specific thing that has gained popularity. It's going to make my book more relevant. I'm going to capture the interest of more readers. Okay, be careful with this because you want to make sure that your book isn't just a trendy thing that might capture a few readers, but then is going to alienate others. That's really important. You also might be doing a relaunch because you're going to be expanding into new markets or new formats. This is really, really important. I think I've recommended to many of you that you have not only an ebook, but a paperback, maybe a hardcover, and consider having an audiobook. There is a growing digital market. There are readers who prefer different formats and who love listening to books. So if you're going to be doing an audiobook, I wouldn't just kind of stealth release my audiobook when I'm ready. I would actually kind of, honor all of the extra work you did and all of the extra investment you made to create this audiobook by doing a huge, complete relaunch so that you can get more attention on each format of your book. So this is something that I'm considering doing. I'm definitely considering launching a few audiobooks in the fall, and definitely that's going to include a relaunch. And of course, I'm sure you've noticed that over time, the initial enthusiasm for your book might be waning, and you might be thinking that relaunching can reignite interest, create more momentum, and remind readers of your book's existence. This, you think, leads to increased visibility, more reviews, and revitalized sales. Now, the thing is, you don't want to fool people into thinking that you have a whole new book. Like, that's a little caveat that I think that you should be really careful with. A full relaunch that looks like a launch, that can be a little bit dangerous and a little bit disingenuous. So sometimes you can just say, you know what, if I want renewed interest, why don't I do new things that feature my book? Why don't I do something new with it? Why don't I reach out to a different audience and create something that's new out of the thing that's old? I think that might be a different plan, right? So each author's motivations for relaunching a book may differ, and the decision to launch or relaunch should be based on a really careful evaluation. We're going to be talking about that because you've got goals. There are ways that you can achieve those goals, but we really need to think about all of this really, really clearly. So determine your objectives. So what is it exactly that you want to do? Is it increasing book sales? Is it attracting new readers? Is it reviving interest in your work? Is it changing a crappy cover? Is it trying a new format? Like, all of these things are different goals, and it can help you to tailor your relaunch strategy and the places where you're going to be spending most time and money. A crucial thing to do before you take your book down and before you start embarking on this relaunch idea is I really want you to take a cold hard look at your book's performance. Take a critical view. Yeah, that hurts sometimes, right? Consider things like, okay, what are my sales figures? What's my reader feedback? What are the reviews that I got? What happened with any of the promotional efforts I made? Like if you did, for example, an ad campaign, how did that do? What were some of the keywords that you feel actually yielded more sales or more attention? And what were the things that didn't work so well and aspects or areas where you need improvement or things that you should be emphasizing during the relaunch? All of that is really important. Now, definitely, if you're relaunching, no matter what the reason is, I would say that this is definitely an opportunity to revise and update your novel. Definitely address any errors or inconsistencies. You can add a little bit of new content. And that's really important because here's the thing. If you're relaunching and you're trying to, market this book, and if somebody who bought the old version sees the book, you want them to still be enticed to kind of maybe check out your new version. And also you might want to consider potentially just having it as an update for anyone who got the ebook so they can get the new version without having to buy a new one. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about how you can make people who bought your old paperback or your old hardcover, how you can keep them from feeling cheated with the relaunch. I've got a few little tips on that one because that's important. But you want to make this enticing to existing readers as well. You definitely want to go into this with a well-executed marketing plan. This is crucial. You can't just go into this randomly. You're going to be considering using a combination of online and offline marketing strategies, things like social media promotions, targeted advertising, author website updates, blog tours, book signings, interviews. All of that good stuff creates a buzz around your relaunch and builds anticipation, and it engages with your audience. Definitely leverage your existing platform though. Don't ignore them. They're going to feel slighted. So if you have an established platform, use it to promote your relaunch. Engage with those email subscribers. Engage with those blog readers. Engage with those social media followers. Share updates. Share your excitement at what's going on and maybe give them an exclusive offer because this will encourage them to spread the word and generate excitement amongst their networks. That's really important. But also, you're not just leveraging your old platform, you want to explore new avenues to how to reach a wider audience. So maybe you've never tried using book promotion websites. Maybe you've never worked with influencers or book reviewers before. I think this can be an opportunity to have more energy spent on promotion because really, again, rewriting your book, rewriting your stuff, your blurbs, and reworking your cover, that's just a piece of it. Definitely seeking opportunities for media coverage, for more visibility, participating in literary events. All of this is going to help you to tap into new reader communities and expand your reach. And incentives, so important, right? Give people discounts, give them bundled deals, right? So what I'm thinking of doing with mine when I relaunch my book that I am now offering as a audiobook as well, I think I might find a way to offer to people who are already on my list and who've already purchased it. I'm going to offer them the audiobook for a vastly discounted price. Or I'm going to bundle it with the ebook for a minute so that they feel like, wow, I have this additional value and I feel like, this is pretty lucky. And also bundling this new audiobook with the ebook for a time, which is like a really low price, this can increase my likelihood of attracting new buyers. So sometimes you have to give people a real deal. You have to kind of forfeit a little bit of that, huge royalty in order to get new buyers. And it's important to engage with your readers and with your fans. So if you have any comments on your blog or on any posts that you make, if you have any messages, try to respond promptly. You want to show appreciation for people's support. They could be supporting anyone and they're choosing to support you. Do not take that for granted. And definitely keep encouraging people to leave reviews because that is so hard to get people to do. But it's so important in order to market your book well. Reviews are precious. So definitely you can be using some of the previous accolades that you got for previous books. Highlight those in your marketing materials. That will entice new readers, even though we're talking about the previous version of the book. It's not like you wiped the whole thing clean and that you're not allowed to use your accolades and reviews from before. I think that that's important too. And definitely you want to be looking at data. You want to be looking at data so that you can monitor the impact of your efforts, so that you can track book sales, website traffic, social media engagement, all of those metrics that help you to evaluate the effectiveness of your marketing, because you can adjust your approach as needed. This is the funny thing. So many authors have a plan and they just stick to it. And while that's great, being able to maximize your success by adjusting little things and tweaking little things, that is your prerogative. This is what's so great about being a self-published author. So keep that in mind. Now let's talk about some of the potential pitfalls and challenges that authors encounter when they are relaunching a book. You want to look out for these things. So the first thing is definitely unrealistic expectations. As I mentioned before, some of you have this unrealistic expectation that I'm going to relaunch my book and everything's going to be just a complete 180. It's going to help it to sell so many copies. I've learned so many things. It's so much better. And I'm going to have so many more sales, so much more reach, so much more impact. Not so much, right? You can be sorely disappointed if you have these types of expectations and if you're not feeding those expectations with actions. So make sure that you're managing expectations and focusing on goals that are achievable. Okay, another problem that happens with a lot of writers is they relaunch, but their launch isn't so different than their relaunch, right? There's a lack of differentiation. And if you do that, if you don't have like kind of added value, whether it's through pretty darn revised content, updated design, additional bonus materials, well, people are going to feel that your new edition is not differentiated enough compared to your previous edition. And that can lead to existing readers being a little bit bummed. And also even new readers being like, wait a second, is this new? Is this old? I don't really know. So that's important, right? You can like definitely be seeming a little bit disingenuous if it's perceived that you're just kind of relaunching the same darn thing over and over again, and that people are just getting this thing that you're trying to make it look fresh by taking it down and putting it back up. That's not a good look. So make sure that you're not doing that. Definitely keep your existing fans and readers informed about the relaunch, because you really want your existing fan base to realize that this is a relaunch. This is not a brand new book, but you might still be excited about it because I've changed this, this, and this. And if you love this, there's more of that sort of thing. But you don't want them to buy your book thinking that they're getting something completely different and be like, hey, wait a second, I've just bought the same thing twice. Like that's a real problem. And you can avoid this by definitely making it really clear that this is a relaunch. And if you've read it before, you're going to be seeing some differences, but it's not a whole new book. Definitely you want to be honest and upfront about that. Another big mistake that some authors make when they're doing a relaunch is that they have poor timing in this whole thing. Now, timing can be pretty important when it comes to publishing a book first and when you're relaunching. So kind of the beauty of the relaunch is that you probably have kind of this increased patience, because usually when you're publishing for the first time, you're like, let's go, let's go, let's go. And you might actually rush it, and you might launch in a crowded period, or when there's a lack of reader interest, or before you've actually done your market research, or before you've really built up an audience and built up the buzz about it. So you kind of jump into it without having that perfect timing. Don't make that mistake again when you're relaunching, right? So definitely use the data to identify when the best timing is, and make sure that it's well aligned with what the events are, what the trends are that are impacting what people are reading. And definitely make sure that when you relaunch your book, make sure that it's readily available across various distribution channels and formats. You want it stocked, you want it accessible, you want it on all those platforms, because if you have a lack of availability at the beginning, your relaunch is going to be a little bit of a dud. You don't want that at all. So let's talk about the things that you definitely need to do before you relaunch your book. I definitely want you to reevaluate your book's performance, right? What happened to it since its initial release? So do that. That is not a step that you can skip just because you feel like you should relaunch. And just because you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to be changing a bunch of stuff that was wrong. The data doesn't lie, so definitely do the research on that. And while you're doing research, make sure that you're making market research. Now, you might be like, no, I'm really clear on what I want my relaunch to be. Sure, but do yourself a favor. This market research might identify new opportunities. It might be something that you overlooked. So don't skip that step. It's really important. Also, when you're relaunching, even if you're like, oh, my relaunch is all about my new cover and it's all about a new format, that's great. But definitely take the opportunity to revise and update your book, even if it's sending it to a few more beta readers who are going to be giving you feedback and just tweaking a couple things. That's really important because, you want it to be as good as it can be. That's really important. Another thing that you absolutely must do before you relaunch is update and expand your author platform, your website, your social media profiles, any other online presence. It should accurately reflect the new edition of your book that's coming up. Also, make sure that your author bio is updated, the book descriptions, any images, all of that stuff's really important because you want to be generating buzz. Generating buzz is crucial, right? Anticipation, and you need to do that on brand. Also, now that you have a little bit of time and experience behind you, can you possibly be securing endorsements and reviews? That would be really, really cool to attract attention and to create credibility. Testimonials are key, and influencers are key. If they align with your target audience, that's something that's really, really huge social proof that you can use to generate more sales. So definitely think about those promotional activities, right? What can you do? Book signings, virtual events, guest posting, all of this stuff is really important. And you probably want to schedule them so that you don't burn out on them, but so that you have kind of some real buzz at the beginning would be optimal. Your marketing materials are crucial. They're assets that you can use to be shared across platforms. And you want to make sure that those are all up to date. And also, again, as I said, your special offers. This is a mistake that I have made so much where I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to do a special offer. And I kind of try to rush into it. Special offers, like nothing else, can definitely engage more readers, but they can also cause your website to break or for there to be problems within your ordering of your book. So you really want to see that if you're offering a sale or a special deal, make sure that that deal is actually working, because if not, you're going to create frustration. So that's really bad. And now that you've launched, you really need to not skip the monitoring and tracking of your results, because that's, after all, why you did this, right? So it's really different when you're relaunching a book compared to promoting a book that's being published for the first time. Because, and this is the good news, is that you've already got an existing platform. Even if it's small, you've got an existing platform, and these people probably have goodwill towards you. Another thing is that you're used to communicating about your book, so keep using those avenues. You have feedback probably from the previous edition, and you can share those positive testimonials. This new version is only better. So you definitely can use those to advertise your book a little bit more. Also, you can focus on the new unique selling points. This gives you a whole thing to focus on, right? If you've got a new fresh perspective, if your context has been tweaked a little bit, you can do one of those. Well, if you loved it before, you'll love it even more now, because that's pretty cool. Now, here's what's fun is, okay, I was saying if you launch your book before, you want to be really careful that your readers don't think that the next relaunch is a new book completely, so that they don't waste their money rebuying it. But you do want to create this sense of exclusivity. So you want to use the relaunch as an opportunity to make people feel like they're part of the in crowd. Some limited availability thing. So I had one of my books under one of my pen names was rejected by Amazon for ads because the cover was a little bit racy, they said, ridiculous. And so I created another cover, which was just as racy, which was also banned, but whatever. I decided to stand by that one. And I decided to advertise my book different ways. But people who had the original cover, I made them feel really special about it. I was like, hey, you're the OG. You have the original cover. That's so cool. And then when I launched a new book, I actually made a little mistake on my cover. And one of my readers was like, hey, did you mean to do this? And I was like, oh no. But I said, well, I'm so sorry. I will send any reader who bought the book that has the little glitch on the cover, I'll send you a new one for free. And every single one of those readers basically responded with something to the tune of, actually, thank you very much, but no, I'm going to keep this and feel really special, like I'm part of a club, and maybe one day this will be worth something. From their mouth to God's ears, right? So that's kind of exciting. So remember that you really need to be clear about, the mistakes that you made along the way, but also how this is different, but that this is, a new version of the old book, right? We're just learning and we're growing, and that's really important. And remember that when you're relaunching, is just an opportunity to correct the wrongs that you did before and to improve on what you had and to use the lessons learned to do something that's going to have more of an impact this time around. I think it's really exciting. It's an opportunity to do it all again, do it right. So many people say, if I could do it all over again, and you can. So let me know if you are a writing coach on demand person. You can let me know in office hours. If you're considering relaunching a book, we can come up with a game plan. If you're considering taking my course from idea to published in 6 months, you're going to learn the things that you can do to avoid having to do a relaunch in the first place. But I don't think a relaunch is a sign that you messed up irretrievably. I think it's a sign that you are growing and learning and moving forward, and that you are determined to make this writing thing work. And I'm so proud of you. I think it's awesome. So that's it. I hope this helped. I really enjoyed being with you here on the How to Be an Author podcast, and I look forward to being with you next time. If you have any pressing writing-related questions or would like to be featured on the How to Be an Author podcast, please feel free to reach out on my website, creativeandwritingcoach.com.